It's time for Recipe of the Day. If you've been listening to my podcast for a while, you have probably heard me say that I do not like to cut up chicken before cooking it. I prefer to get it cooking, and if I need it in pieces, I'll cut it after. It just speeds things up for me to get it cooking first, and honestly, I find cutting up raw chicken to be a little bit messy. But there are a couple of recipes that I do cut up chicken for. One is the homemade orange chicken on Cook the Story, and the other is a Chinese-style garlic chicken on the Cookful. And every time I make those, I'm like, oh, this chicken is just so good. And then it occurred to me one day that it might be because it is cut up. And I started thinking about it and realized that that had to be true. And so I did some testing and some comparing. And yes, this is especially true for chicken breast. If you cut it into bite-sized pieces first and then follow a couple of other steps I'm going to tell you about, but you cut it up first, you end up with more tender and juicy chicken. And if you're thinking about it right off the bat, you know why, right? So cutting it into small pieces means that you are cutting the fibers of the chicken. And this is a little bit like when we talk about slicing beef against the grain. The reason that we do that is that we're making the fibers as short as possible so that when we're chewing the meat, there's less chewing involved because the fibers are cut in that way. And then we get the impression of more tenderness. So when we cut the chicken into little cubes, we are doing the same thing. We're making the fibers of the meat shorter, which means less chewing, which gives us the sensation of more tender meat. Now, also, when we cut it small, we cook it for less time. You know, the thing that makes chicken breast dry is when you have to cook it for a long time and the outside ends up overcooked or dry before the inside gets to that safe temperature. If your piece is small, the inside is going to be cooked faster, and so the outside isn't in the heat for as long, and you have juicier chicken. So just by cutting it into little cubes, like an inch and a half, you are already making your chicken juicier and more tender. But I did the testing and I have a couple of extra steps that makes it even better. They are to salt it and then leave it for a little while. So you cut your chicken up into cubes and then you salt it all over and spread it out kind of in a single layer on a plate and leave it for 15 to 30 minutes. That is safe. It is safe to have the chicken out of the fridge for that length of time. What happens is the salt penetrates to add more flavor, kind of like a quick little dry brine, right? But also the chicken is coming up to room temperature, which means, you probably guessed it, it takes even less time to cook. The center is going to reach its done temperature even faster, which means that your chicken's going to be juicier. And then you're going to cook it quickly in a pan on the stove. And then importantly, as soon as it's done, you transfer it from the pan to a clean plate, and then it's not in contact with the heat anymore. And so it stops cooking and you're not drying it out, and you just get the juiciest chicken pieces. So I have two more things to say before I tell you the actual recipe. First, this works for chicken breast and for chicken thigh. It just matters less for chicken thigh because chicken thighs are already juicy and more tender, and they tend to not dry out as much if you cook them longer. In fact, sometimes they seem to get even better because more of the juiciness is melting into the meat. You can do this for chicken thighs. Boneless, skinless chicken thighs are going to work perfectly here. It's just not going to be as noticeable a difference if you do it with the boneless, skinless chicken breasts. You're going to be amazed. The other thing that I'm going to say is that this also works for chicken breast slices, but you want to make sure that you are slicing it against the grain. So we're doing bite-sized pieces. We're going to be cutting it into 3/4 inch thick strips and then cutting those into pieces. So the fibers end up short no matter how you cut it. I even tried to do it in different ways to make sure that I was right, even though spatially it seemed correct to me. I wanted to make sure. And yeah, it doesn't matter. But for slices, you want to have a good look at that chicken breast and try to see those fine lines in it. It's a little bit harder to see when they're raw, but picture when you're doing shredded chicken. You know how the chicken flakes into those long strands? You're trying to spot those. And then you want to cut across them, perpendicular to them. You do not want to slice along them. If you slice along them, you get long strands of cooked chicken, which you then have to chew through, and it makes it seem less tender. So if you are pre-slicing your chicken breast to do fajitas or stir fry or something like that, make sure that you are slicing it against the grain, and then you can do all the same steps that we're talking about. That is going to be just great. It's just a little bit different from the bite-sized pieces because you have to be aware of that fiber. Okay, I'm going to tell you now how to cook these bite-sized pieces of chicken on the stove, and I'm already laughing at myself myself because, of course, this seems like it should just be the shortest, simplest of recipes, and yet I've talked for 5 minutes already, but it really is these few simple steps that if you get them right, you are going to be amazed by this chicken. Okay, so I'm starting here with 2 boneless, skinless chicken breasts, and you're slicing them into 3/4 inch thick slices, and then you're going to cut each slice into 3/4 inch pieces. Then you're going to sprinkle that all over with a whole teaspoon of salt, and then I like to do a teaspoon of garlic powder and half a teaspoon of black pepper. No matter what I'm using these for, those 3 are going to be there, and then of course you can add whatever other seasonings you want depending on what you're making. It's going to be different if you're doing an Asian style dish or an Italian style dish or like an Indian curry. Those are going to be different, so that is up to you. Toss the chicken to coat with all those spices and then spread them out in a single layer on a plate and leave them at room temperature for 15 to 30 minutes. Like I said, totally safe. Don't worry about that. Okay, after that time, you're going to heat a large skillet over medium-high heat. You're going to add a tablespoon of cooking oil to that, and when it's hot, you're adding the chicken in a single layer. Spread it out right away and then cook it undisturbed until it's browned underneath. It's going to be about 2 to 3 minutes. Then flip and stir and keep cooking and stirring until the chicken is no longer pink inside. I usually pick like one of the bigger pieces and cut into it, and if it's not pink, then immediately scrape all that chicken onto a clean plate out of the pan. You don't want it in contact with the heat anymore. I know so often we just take the pan off the stove and then we like serve ourselves out of that. You do not want to do that because it's going to keep cooking and that's going to dry it out. So scrape it out onto a plate. And if there's any liquid in the pan, sometimes liquid comes off the chicken, drizzle that over top of the chicken. It is so good. And then you put this with whatever you're going to be having for your meal. It's great for meal prep too. You could do more of it. And then I pack it in the fridge with those juices, drizzle them on top, pack it in the fridge. And then when you're reheating it, just stir it so that those juices get to kind of go around and steam them. That's going to be really, really fantastic. I really can't wait for you to try this. I know it's going to change your chicken cooking world. You're not going to believe how juicy and tender those chicken breast pieces are. Okay, I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is May 15th of 2025. I really am so excited for you to try this. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment and a rating after you give it a try. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast recipe of the day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.